This happened to me about 5 years ago, and even now, I still get chills thinking about it. I was renting a small house in a quiet neighborhood at the time. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was cozy, affordable, and had lots of character. The only thing I didn't love was the crawl space under the house. The access door to it was in the laundry room, a square wooden hatch flush with the floor. It was locked from the outside, and I never had any reason to open it. I just figured it was pipes, cobwebs, and the usual creepy crawl space stuff. One evening, I came home late from work. It had been a stressful day, and all I wanted to do was shower and collapse into my bed. As I stepped inside, I noticed something strange. My laundry room light was on. I was sure I had turned it off in the morning, but I chalked it up to me being absent-minded in the rush and just turned it off again. That night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to a faint noise. At first, I just thought it was the wind, but as I laid there, I realized it was coming from the laundry room. A soft, rhythmic thumping sound. My heart started to race. I debated whether to get up and check or just stay in bed and hope it stopped. Curiosity got the better of me, so I grabbed my phone for light and tiptoed to the laundry room. When I opened the door, everything was quiet, but then I saw it. The hatch to the crawl space was slightly ajar. My stomach dropped. I distinctly remember it being locked, and there's no way I could have opened it accidentally. Trying to stay calm, I convinced myself it might be an animal that somehow had gotten in. I shut the hatch tightly and placed a heavy box of detergent on top of it before going back to bed. The next day, I called the landlord to ask if there was any pest issues that I need to know about. He seemed surprised and said no one had reported anything like that before. Still, he promised to send someone over to check it out. That night, I double-checked the hatch and even put a chair on top of it for good measure. I didn't hear any noises, and I started to feel a little silly for being so freaked out. But around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door creaking open. My bedroom door doesn't creak unless you push it open slowly, and I knew it had been closed before. I stayed as still as I could, barely breathing, as I heard soft footsteps shuffle into my room. My phone was on the nightstand, just out of reach. The footsteps stopped right next to my bed. I could feel someone's presence, their quiet breathing in the dark. Summoning every ounce of courage I had, I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and swung it towards the intruder. There was a man crouched on the floor, his face pale, his eyes wide, unblinking. He looked just as startled as I was. I screamed and bolted out of the room, running outside to my neighbor's house. I banged on the door until they let me in, and they called the police. When the officers arrived, they found the man still in my house, hiding in the crawl space. He had a small mattress, some food wrappers, and a collection of random items he must have taken from my house. The lock on the hatch had been tampered with, and from the looks of it, he had been living under my house for at least a few days, maybe longer. The scariest part? The police said they found a notebook with detailed notes about me. He had written down my daily routine, when I left for work, when I came home, even what I wore. There is also a list of plans, though they wouldn't tell me what was on it. I moved out the next week and stayed with friends until I found a new place. To this day, I have no idea how he got in or how long he had been watching me before I noticed something was wrong. So to the man in the crawl space, let's not meet, ever. This happened over a decade ago, when I was 12 years old. I live in a small town in Oklahoma, and in my neighborhood, the houses are fairly spaced apart, separated by woods. It was a school day, so my grandma picked me up from school and brought me home. This was the first year that I got dropped off at my house alone. Before this, I would go to my grandma's house after school. I would get dropped off at around 3 p.m. and my parents would be home around 4:30. Not that big of a deal. That day, for some reason, my dad wasn't getting home until around 7 p.m., and my mom, a teacher, wouldn't be home until around 8 p.m. because she had parent-teacher conferences at school. This happened in early fall, so it wouldn't get dark until about 8 p.m. I did what I usually did when I got home. I ran upstairs, got on my Xbox 360, and played Minecraft with my friends. It was just me and my friend Seth. I was playing for about 2 hours when I heard a car door shut in my driveway. No one should be there until about 7 p.m. My house is set up to where my upstairs has windows that look over the driveway. So with my mic on and controller in hand, I went to the window to see who it was. Maybe my dad got off earlier than expected. I looked outside. It was a red truck. No one I know drives a red truck. The person pulled into the middle of the driveway, sideways, like he owned the place. When I looked out the window, I saw a man with a hat, wearing a big camo hoodie and jeans. It was September, so no one should be wearing a big hoodie with jeans in Oklahoma. By the time I looked out, he was already almost out of view, going up the walkway to my front door. I thought maybe it was one of my dad's friends or someone my dad hired to do something, but he would usually tell me if someone was going to come over. Soon after, I hear a knock at the door, then another. I go to my other window that has a better view of the walk up to my front door. I see the guy walking back down the walkway. I switch and go back to looking through the other window, overlooking the driveway. I tell Seth that he's walking back to his truck now. Instead, he walks past his truck and tries to open my garage side door. At this point, my heart sinks. I tell Seth that this guy tried to get into my house. Mind you, it's literally broad daylight, like 5 p.m. Luckily, the door was locked because sometimes we forget to lock it. After he tried the door, he starts walking to my back patio. I drop my headset and quietly run down the stairs to see what he's doing. I get downstairs and stand by the wall so I'm not visible from the back door or living room windows. I just listen. I hear him try to open the door, then I hear a thud. It sounded like he dropped a brick on the ground or something. At this point, I'm more scared than I've ever been. I wanted to call my parents or grandma, but I didn't have a cell phone yet. The only phone in this house was in the kitchen. I would have to cross the living room to get there, and he would be able to see me. A few seconds after the thud, I peek around the corner, and he was gone. I run back upstairs and put my headset on, telling Seth that he just tried to open the back door as well. As I'm telling him, I hear the car door shut. This time, when I look out the window, he had finally got into his truck. I look at the truck closer, and I notice the only thing he has in the bed of his truck was a crowbar and shovel. He sat in his truck for what felt like a few minutes. During this time, Seth told me, get my iPod and take a picture of his license plate, but he was parked where I couldn't see it. Then he drove backwards out of my driveway and down the road. A few minutes after he was confirmed gone, I went downstairs to see what the thud could have been. I get to the back door and see that the doormat was moved. Both big potted plants had been moved as well. He was looking for a key. Holy fuck, we have a hidden key back there too. The key to the back door was under one of the smaller plant pots on the ledge next to the door, not the bigger ones that he had checked under. I then went to the front porch, and all the pots looked like they had been moved too. I don't know what he would have done if he was able to find the key, or if he just broke in. After he left, I called my dad and told him what happened. When my dad got home, we had a cop come over, and I told him what happened and gave them a description. Luckily, the guy never came back. About 2 nights ago, I went to go see the new Wicked movie with my family who was in town for Thanksgiving. I arrived back to my house around midnight. I live alone in a shared but divided house with 2 other tenants living inside. One is upstairs, and one splits the downstairs with me, so there's 3 apartments total. My place is in back of the house and has a porch that you can go through after walking up the whole driveway. When I got home, I sat in my bedroom and did about 20 to 30 minutes of work on my computer. During this time, the house was very quiet and I kept hearing a man's voice constantly talking. Now, keep in mind, the tenant above me is a man, and I know that his bedroom is right above mine because I previously lived up there. It sounded like he was talking on the phone, just because of how long and continuous the talking went on. I tried to listen and figure out where the voice was coming from, and I couldn't exactly pinpoint it, but it was either coming through the ceiling or on the other side of my room. Now, it must be noted that my bedroom connects to the porch with a door that I blocked with my dresser. There's a main door inside the porch that you can use to get into the house, but there's also a strange door connecting to my room. I couldn't make out the words, but because of how firm and continuous the voice was going on, I just figured that it had to be coming from my housemate upstairs. It's the only thing that would make logical sense. I just kept thinking though, I never heard a single voice coming from the ceiling before. It's not that thin. Whatever, I'm worrying about nothing. After about 20 to 30 minutes of computer work, I got up and brushed my teeth, fed my fish, and got ready for bed. I come back into my room, turn off the lights, and get into bed. Keep in mind, it's been about 45 to 60 minutes since I first heard the voice, and I can still hear it. Damn, I thought. My housemate is chatting up a storm on the phone up there. Oh, how wrong I was. After about 3 minutes of laying in bed, I all of a sudden heard my porch door creaking along the talking man's voice. It was a very distinct sound, and I knew immediately it was my porch door. I crept across my room and put my ear to the dresser, covering the door that connects to the porch. Sure enough, the talking was coming from inside the porch, and I could hear the door moving and shuffling inside my porch along with it. My heart absolutely dropped. All the lights were off in my house at this point, so I had sort of a sneaky advantage to creep around the house to get a view of what was going on. I crept down my hallway and peered into the kitchen, which the porch leads into. Across the kitchen, through the door, and in a streak of moonlight, I see a man with long, scraggly hair sitting curled up in the corner of my porch with his back to me, muttering out loud to himself and rocking back and forth. My fight or flight kicked in, and I immediately ripped open the door and started screaming for him to get out, trying to intimidate him. Looking back, I probably shouldn't have made myself vulnerable without a weapon handy, but like I said, it was just fight or flight. I can't explain my actions in the moment, other than reacting out of fear and determination to scare him off. Anyways, the dude didn't even react to me whipping open the door and screaming at him, not even a flinch. He simply turned his head to the side very slowly and said, "My name is Evan." This freaked me out so much for some reason, especially because he still hadn't turned around to show his face. I said I don't care and kept cussing at him to leave. He slowly rose up his hands and said, I know, I'm hiding." He wasn't saying it in a pleading way though. He said it with almost a childlike, playful tone, and it absolutely freaked me the fuck out. The fact that he kept trying to reason with me and act so mysterious while still not even turning around to show his face just pissed me off, honestly. Who do you think you are, bro? I ran him out of the porch and was just threatening him. Now I assumed that he was just a homeless man who was under the influence of something, as I live in the inner city and it's common to see homeless people near my street. But I don't know, man. The sight of seeing him on my porch and knowing that he was there for an hour beforehand while I was sitting right there just freaked me the fuck out. I was in full-blown defense mode by the time I opened the door, and I wasn't willing to waste any time to do a character dive on this guy. No imaginable situation would permit anyone to be on my porch like that for an hour. Needless to say, I'll be double-checking my porch lock every night from now on. It's funny having a room connected to the porch. I've always had this horrific intrusive thought that I hear someone out there at night. Looks like it came true. So please, Evan, let's never ever meet again, you creepy bastard. You hear stories about people unknowingly squatting into other people's homes, but you never think it would actually happen to you. It happened to me. I'm a 31-year-old female. About 10 years ago, I was living in a two-family house on the second floor with my then toddler. For the story to make sense, I need to try to explain the layout and the backstory. My brother's close friend at the time lived on the first floor and is the one that referred me to the landlord. We had a private front entrance, but shared the back entrance with a staircase that ran from the basement all the way up to the second floor. I would frequently leave the back door unlocked because I had a habit of locking my keys in the house, and my downstairs neighbor could let me in the back door. The downstairs neighbor had a friend who was kind of down and out. He had a history of substance abuse, but was supposedly clean at this time. He was a relatively nice guy, and our neighbor had been letting him stay on his couch for a while. The neighbor had a 4-year-old daughter, and having someone sleeping on the couch without any plans of finding a permanent living situation was becoming disruptive to their everyday lives. The neighbor finally tells him he needs to go. It was summertime, so the friend decides he's going to sleep on the couch or on our covered porch. We tell him that's not acceptable, and when we asked him to leave, we meant the property in general. It also became abundantly clear that he was using again, and his behaviors had become somewhat erratic. He was also making a lot of unsolicited advances on me, which had become increasingly uncomfortable. He wasn't happy, but it wasn't our problem. He stopped coming around, and we no longer saw him around town. Fast forward a month or two, and I noticed things going missing. Jewelry, small amounts of money left around the house, lighters, inconsequential items I had written off as lost. This house was old, with paper-thin walls. The back door in question was right next to the bathroom along one side of the shower. It also made a very distinct noise when opened. One day my car was at the mechanic, so it probably appeared that I wasn't home. I'm showering and I swear I hear the back door open. I freeze, practically stop breathing, but after a few minutes when nobody murdered me in American Psycho style, I wrote it off again. I'm a notorious wimp and had a history since childhood of thinking every strange noise was a potential murderer. This was a long time ago, so I don't remember exactly the length of time, possibly a few weeks. The basement was really big and shared, and the landlord also stored some stuff down there. It was very packed with some very dark corners. We rarely went down there. The landlord comes by one day and goes down to the basement. He hears a strange noise, grabs a baseball bat, and finds a man in our basement. The man pushes the landlord down, runs out of the house and down the street. We call the police, who find him hiding in a trash can around the corner. Can't make this shit up. Upon further investigation, we find the basement window had been ever so slightly propped open. In the back corner behind some boxes was a nest of blankets filled with our missing items and some drug paraphernalia. He had also left his phone in the chaos, where we found a lot of pictures of me sleeping. This man had been high on crack, living in our basement, and regularly entering my apartment both when I wasn't home and when I was sleeping, for months. While he seemed like a nice guy, he was regularly high on drugs, and that changes people. I still get chills knowing that he could have done anything to me and my child, and I would have never seen it coming. The worst part is, the charges somehow got dropped, and they never even consulted us, and they never gave us options as a victim. This was not even close to his first criminal offense. My state is notoriously soft on nonviolent criminals, regardless of whether it was a victimless crime or not. My local police department is also notorious for making deals in exchange for information on even small-time dealers. We don't get any justice. Luckily, this didn't have much of a lasting effect on my mental health, just more of a what the fuck, can't believe this really happened. It feels like a fever dream. Jason, let's not meet. This all happened when I was in college. As I've said in some of my previous stories, this was a period in my life where just a lot of creepy shit happened to me. I don't really know what I was doing to attract so much weirdos at that time of my life, but I probably should have been evaluating my life choices a little more closely. But anyway, on to the story. During college, I worked as a tutor at school, but on the weekends, I would sometimes babysit for family friends. One of the kids was actually old enough that he didn't really need a babysitter, but he wasn't old enough to watch the younger kid. We'll call him Kevin. Thus, my presence on that night would prove to be honestly terrifying as fuck. I don't know, maybe you won't think it's as bad as I felt it was. We'll see. So anyway, I was babysitting for this family one Saturday night. The parents didn't usually stay out late, getting home at like 10 p.m. or earlier even most nights when I babysat for their monthly date night. But this particular night was a special situation. I can't remember the circumstances of it now, but I mean, I was 19. I could stay out past 10 p.m. They figured that they'll be home by 1 a.m., and they said I'm welcome to spend the night. But I already decided that would not be happening. That house honestly had a super weird vibe. It was kind of isolated, and they had all these old buildings on the property. Maybe I watched too many horror movies, but all I could think was that there's so many places for people to hide in those buildings. Plus, the house was really old too, and always freaked me out a bit. Because, ghosts. So I would not be spending the night, that was for sure. So I was babysitting the kids, and Kevin wanted me to go help him find something in the basement. He had all these costumes he used to like to dress up in. Once, he even scared the absolute shit out of me when he came up behind me in the dark, wearing an ultra-realistic soldier costume, carrying a replica musket that I would have sworn was real, but it turned out it wasn't. I nearly lost my shit that night. The basement was the second creepiest part of the house. The creepiest part was the attic, because attics are terrifying, so if he would have asked me to go up there, it would have been a hard no. The basement wasn't fully finished and was really big with lots of corners and turns, including hallways and shit, with a bunch of different rooms. It was actually my first time going beyond the stairway, and I kept thinking that if I had been aware of just how scary this basement was, there's no way in hell I'd be babysitting in this house. But of course, I didn't want to look like a wimp in front of a child. So I went down with Kevin to his costume area, which was kind of deep into the basement, because of course it was. As we were looking for the costume, well, Kevin was looking, I was questioning my life choices that led me to this moment. We heard noises that could only be described as footstep-like upstairs. At first, I just said it must be Chris, but then Chris was suddenly in the doorway, scaring the fucking hell out of me. Seriously, no idea where the fuck he came from, and he was like, "That's not me." I remember this moment vividly. The three of us standing near the closet filled with various costumes of varying creepiness in this teeny room in a sketchy basement, listening to what we thought were footsteps upstairs. Well, this is how we die, I thought, weirdly kind of immediately at peace with it. That only lasted a second before I thought, fuck that shit, and I looked around for a weapon. This is where watching too many horror movies actually came in handy. Of course, there was nothing, because I was in a child's playroom, and the rest of the basement had little within it, apart from a washer and dryer, which would make a poor weapon unless I could somehow push it onto someone, which seemed unlikely in this particular situation. In the end, I settled on this random crowbar. For real, it was just laying on the floor, and neither kid knew why. I can't express how creepy this basement was. I prepared to meet our fate while considering how much of a risk I would be willing to take to keep these kids safe. It was at that moment I realized something. The dog wasn't barking. The family had this golden retriever named Lily who would bark at fucking everything. and she wasn't barking. So I rationalized the sounds as just noises an old house would make. Plus I realized when we heard the noises, we weren't actually under the house itself based on the layout of the basement. We were under the porch. So even if there was someone, it wasn't someone in the actual home. It could have been anyone, a delivery driver being the most likely explanation. I felt a little better, but you bet your ass I kept the crowbar. Again, I say horror movies. They seriously prepared me for this type of situation. The kids and I went upstairs where we found Lily knocked the fuck out. Not like someone knocked her out. She was just zonked. Like she jolted awake when I touched her because she was sleeping so soundly. I actually thought she was dead at first because that was the way the night was going. Once upstairs, I went to the porch and very cautiously opened the door to look outside for a possible package. It was winter, so it got dark early, meaning it was feasible that a delivery driver would still be working after the sun went down. But naturally, there was no package. Of course there wasn't, right? I wouldn't be posting this if this is how the story ended. So anyway, by this point, I was stressed the hell out, but the kids were over it. While they were playing video games and I googled the crime rates in this town, all of a sudden Lily perked up and started barking like a maniac. A second later, I heard a knock at the door. I just couldn't catch a fucking break this night. With my crowbar in hand, I walked to the door. I could see through the frosted window in the door that someone was standing there. I couldn't make out their features, but someone was there. Since I'm not a total dumbass, I didn't open the door, but I did ask through the door who it was. The man on the other side of the door said that they had a pizza delivery. You already know what I'm gonna say. We didn't order a pizza. This was before every kid had a cell phone, so the boys couldn't have ordered one. Plus, they had already been totally dead to the world while they played video games. And if the parents had ordered a pizza, they would have told me. So naturally, I again was prepared to fight for my life. I gripped the crowbar as I told the guy we hadn't ordered a pizza. I thought for sure he was gonna insist and try to get me to open the door, but surprisingly he didn't. He just said, "Oh, sorry, my mistake," and he turned and left. At this point, I had a lot of questions, as one would when facing a series of unusual events in a creepy house in the middle of nowhere. So as I saw the guy walk off the porch through the frosted window, I opened the door slightly. I wanted to see this guy, in case I needed to identify him out of a lineup or something. But by the time I opened the door, he was walking away, so I only saw his back. But I immediately noticed two strange things. I didn't see a pizza in his hands, and I didn't see his car. The latter I could rationalize because he might have parked on the street, which would have been strange since they had a large horseshoe-shaped driveway. But maybe. But there was no pizza. I guess technically it might have just been blocked from view, but I doubt that very much. I almost called him out on this too, in a burst of ill-timed bravery, but then realized that if I did, he would have known the jig was up and would have had nothing to lose. So I just closed and locked the door. Later that night, Lily again knocked out, and the kids were upstairs in bed. I didn't think I'd fall asleep. I honest to God was sitting there with a crowbar in my hands, on high alert, like I was about to fight for my life. In hindsight, maybe it was a bit of an overreaction, but I wasn't going to be one of those idiots who dies because they underestimate the threat level. I might as well have suggested the kids and I split up. Well, of course, I realized in that moment that was essentially what happened. They wouldn't have been much help anyway. Well, actually, Chris might have been, because he was 14, as tall as I was, and could break a board with his fist. Maybe I should keep him around. Anyway, eventually I did fall asleep for like a half hour, and I was awoken by the sound of an owl. I'm a really light sleeper, so either the owl hooting woke me up, or it was just a coincidence, but I heard it when I woke up, only it didn't sound quite right. It sounded almost like an owl, but something was off about it. As I look back on this now, what I did next was extraordinarily foolish given the events that had transpired that night, but I think my tired brain wasn't working fast enough. That's the real killer in horror movies, exhaustion. In my fatigued state, I decided to investigate. I went to the door and listened. The owl was still hooting, but it still sounded weird. I couldn't figure out why it sounded so off, and this is when I did another stupid thing. I opened the door. With the door open, I could hear the owl a little bit better and looked into the darkness, shining my light from my phone around. Given that this was early 2007, the light left a lot to be desired. Suddenly, I heard the owl again, and I honest to God gasped because this is when it all came together. The hooting didn't sound like an actual owl. It sounded like a human imitating an owl. For real, even recalling it now for this story is giving me literal chills. Maybe it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. The moment when I realized this, my heart was about to fucking pound out of my chest, and I still had the beam of my light pointed into the darkness. And that's when I saw it reflected off a set of eyes that were at a level humans would be. And remember, this is 2007, so the light was total shit, which means the owner of said eyes was uncomfortably close, though it was so dark I couldn't make out anymore. I wasn't tired anymore, so I came to my senses, locked the fucking door, barricaded it with a chair, and retreated into the living room after checking all the downstairs windows again. I grabbed a big ass knife from the kitchen, like Michael Myers style knife, because at that point, I legitimately thought I might need it. I really contemplated calling the police, but what was I gonna tell them? That someone was outside making owl noises and had eyes? They'd be like, "That's a fucking owl, you idiot," and then probably hang up on me. So I just sat on the couch again, this time clutching the knife and crowbar both, as I tried not to think about the horror stories I've read or seen, especially the ones involving well-meaning babysitters meeting gruesome ends. But I was not successful, and I did not fall asleep again. Around midnight, the couple came home. I had texted them to kind of warn them without sounding like I completely lost any shred of cool. I just said that I thought I heard someone outside, so to be careful when they got home. They were totally unbothered because they lived in some bizarro world where bad things didn't ever happen to good people. They walked in nonchalantly while I put the knife away before they saw me clinging to it, like a shipwrecked victim clings to any piece of floating debris they can find. And this is when they told me that they thought they heard someone outside a few nights ago. Because of course this wasn't something you would tell a babysitter beforehand. I mean, why would I need to know that? So I took my money, ran to my car, and got the fuck out of there. Once I got home, I realized I still had the crowbar, and I won't lie to you, I never brought it back. I mean, because of their critical omission of information, I lived what was nearly an actual nightmare. So I fucking earned the crowbar too. This was the end of my babysitting career. Only one time did I babysit for them, and that was during a legit medical emergency that one of the parents was having. I mean, I couldn't well turn them down when they called me in desperation. And nothing weird happened that night, thank fucking God, because I don't think I would have had the mental capacity to deal with that shit again. But you know, even all these years later, I know one thing with absolute certainty. That was not an owl.